All right, we picked up this little Razor 170 this spring 2021. We grabbed it new. Decided right away that we needed a skid plate for it because it sits so low to the ground. I wanted to make my own so I didn't have to drill into the frame. A lot of the aftermarket skid plates you have to drill into the frame. So here's the original skid plate. It only covers a fuel tank. It immediately cracked. I don't know, it's super thin. The kids only had it on a couple rides and somehow it already cracked. I took it off and you'll see the crack was pretty large, but I did save it so I could use the same bolt pattern. I used it as a template so I could reuse those bolts when I mounted the new one. Also picked up these fender washers. These are stainless steel. I think they were 1 3/16. And then I picked up these button head hex bolts from McMaster-Carr. They were M6s. And then I also picked up some flange lock nuts, M6s. Picked up a sheet of HDPE, which if I remember right from my plastics class stands for high density polyethylene. I grabbed it at Menards for $61.99 a sheet. It's 1/4 inch thick. One side is really smooth, the other side is textured. I put the textured side up and then the smooth side towards the ground on the Razor. The first step of cutting this out, it's almost a 4x8 sheet. So I first cut it at 37.5 inches wide, and then I cut it at 58 inches long. I made the cuts on my panel saw, my table saw, just using a carbide blade. It cut fairly well. Then my next step, I clamped it to the machine itself and with some clamps, and then I traced out where the fenders would be and where the oil drain plug would be, and then kind of where the heat sink is on the motor. I wanted to drill some extra holes there. So I traced all that out, and then I just cut it with a good blade on a hand saber saw. So it was pretty easy to cut overall. And that part went really, really well, cutting it out and drilling the holes. I did all the work for the skid plate while the Razor was up on my ramps. It was fairly easy to get to at that point. It did not seem as much of a challenge once it was up on the ramp. So I backed it in to do the back half, and I drove it up forward to do the front half. My skid plate only covers, the very front, middle, and the back half of the Razor. It did not cover the very back where the chain guard is and stuff. That's just a small piece. I haven't decided if I'm going to put a skid plate on. All right, so my next step was to locate the holes. I wanted to use the same nuts that were welded to a tab in the floor pan. And in order to do that, I took off all those bolts. They're all M6s. And then I used this tiny drill bit, and I drilled right through the where the nut is into my plastic that was clamped to the bottom of the Razor. So that just gave me the location of all those bolt holes that I was going to use. So then I just enlarged those holes. I took the piece of plastic back off the Razor, enlarged those holes, and then clamped it back into place to mount it.
My new bolts
and then, of course, I used the same mounting spots for the old skid plate as well. So there was quite a bit of existing mounting tabs I could use. I used the whole front half under where the seat, your floorboards are. And then I used the back section where the fuel tank was. So I felt like that really secured a big portion of the skid plate. As you can see in that video, my bolts I bought from McMaster-Carr are a little bit long. So I figured I would just cut those off with a rotary tool and then either cap them or just file them a little bit. But I don't think you could go much shorter than that because there is a little difference in how they welded the tabs. So that was a 50 millimeter length on that bolt, and I just think you might be able to get down to, just a little less, like 40, but I kind of erred on the safe side, went a little longer because I figured I could cut those off. And I know it's not completely ideal to have that in the top, but, it didn't seem to bother the kids, and, it seemed to be a lot better than drilling holes in the frame. These are the only two spots I drilled into the actual machine. So it's not the frame, but there was a little plate up by the steering. So I just drilled 2 holes. and then used leftover 6mm bolts from the floor pan just to mount that front part. You could bend this without a heat gun, but I did bend this little section. I heated up the middle and bent it with a heat gun just a little bit to make it fit a little tighter, but that's probably not necessary. So now you'll see the back. The back I got a little sloppy on. I just kind of got lazy at the end, and I just used some zip ties on the back. But I planned on using those roll bar clamps, and I did put one of those in there, and it just seemed to be a little bit tricky to get in there, but I'll probably go back through with my right angle drill and maybe add some more of those on there. But as you can see, yeah, it's a little muddy, but it's holding up great. They went over a couple logs. They actually did get stuck on the back with a stump, but they didn't do any damage that time, so that was really nice. And I think it's really going to hold up well. It does scrape a little bit on my ramps getting it into my truck, but I think it's going to be perfect for what I was going for. So really happy with this. I don't have much money into it, under $100 for sure, and I think it's going to last a really long time. So anyway, good luck with your skid plate build, and I hope it goes as good for you as it did me. And I hope you learned something from my video. Have a great day.